Alison Alvarez is a 2016 last time. She's a double master's degree from Carnegie Mellon Computer Science and also her MBA. She took full advantage of the opportunities that the Schwartz Center offered. She was one of our Schwartz Fellows. Her team, BlastPoint, which you're going to hear about today, was an actual winner in the McGinnis Venture Competition, first place. It was awesome. When we reached out and said, Allison, would you be willing to come back and talk about big data since that's your focus, and her computer science degree was in that, her earlier career was in big data. Now she has a really cool startup. She said yes. But one of my favorite stories about Allison is I was teaching lean entrepreneurship at the time that Allison was a student, and I always try to get class discussion going, and Allison was always there to answer a question. And she was so knowledgeable, it was like an encyclopedia. I actually gave her the nickname Allisinopedia. So without further ado, Allisinopedia.
Yay! Okay. All right, All right, yeah, I'm not a CMU student anymore. So my name's Allison. It's really nice to meet you guys. So as Dave said, I'm a Tepper alumni, and I owe a lot to this school. They taught me, there's a lot of concepts that I thought I knew vaguely, but they gave me the words to talk about them. And for this talk today, I was thinking about my Tepper education. So how many people of you are Tepper students, and how many people are from other schools at CMU? Got a couple Tepper people, and then where are the rest of you coming in from? It's like mouths might be full. But like Hines, it looks like, or public policy? Undergrad, okay. So it looks like you guys are coming from a lot of different schools. And having been a CMU alumni, I sort of looked at the topic of the talk, and it was how to turn big data into knowledge. And I was like, I bet most of the people here probably already know how to do that. Or you're going to take a class that will teach you how to do that. There's even a class called Big Data here at the Tepper School. It's a mini semester, so you could probably take that pretty quick if you wanted to. And so I was like, I don't know if that's the most useful thing for me to talk about if you guys want to learn something. So I thought instead I would teach you guys how to fish when it comes to building products around big data, and talk about our journey for basically figuring out what problems existed for our customers and turning that into a business itself. I thought that would be more interesting than me talking about correspondence analysis and k-means clustering, which can get pretty technical. I'm hoping this is something that's like a little bit broader, that all of you guys can take something out of this. So this is like my teaching you to fish talk. And I was a little mad at myself, because usually what I do is I have a bunch of canned talks and I just give more canned talks. So this is not canned. I wrote this for you guys. So we'll see how this goes, because I'm not usually as rehearsed as I usually am. And just to let you know, so I talked a little bit about why we're here. I'm going to let you know what BlastPoint is and what my company is, what it does. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did to find our value proposition, which is if you're going to be an actual business, you need to find that first and foremost and be able to communicate it. I'm going to talk about how we use user interviews to build our product, and some notes on UX that we use to improve our product along the way. And it's all really low-cost stuff. This is all stuff that you are CMU students, you can do everything that I'm talking about in this lecture, where I feel like if I'd done a lecture on, say, machine learning, maybe some of you would have gotten a lot out of that, but I feel like a lot of people might be like, that's not necessarily where I am right now. I will hire a nerd to do that. So let's get started. So this is our company in a nutshell. So this is my co-founder, Tomer. We actually met at a Connects workshop, the very first one of the 2015-2016 school year. And he is from ECE. He was working on a master's degree at the time. And Dave made me pitch first, because he knew he could pick on me. And so I did. And Tomer came up to me and was like, I like your idea. And at the same time, I was taking lean entrepreneurship. Dave was still teaching that class. And I used that class to sort of explore what this company could potentially be and do market research. And so I got 5 of my classmates to help me out with that. And so a lot of the backbone I built while I was here using resources at Carnegie Mellon. So one of the things we did to sort of develop our company is we got really good at pitching, and we took advantage of some of the resources here in public speaking, in leadership, in order to develop our pitches. And that was how we funded the company at first, because I come from poor people. I could not go to my family and say, hey, give me money to start this company. We ended up getting a little bit from Alpha Lab when we started in the initial cohort, but really most of our seed money came from winning the McGinnis venture competition at first, and then winning the Uprise venture competition. So if you are also from poor people like me, I would say it is a worthwhile skill to learn how to pitch your company in 5 to 10 minutes, and tell a really compelling story and get people to give you money that way. So what do we do as a company at BlastPoint? So our whole reason for existence is that I worked in the big data industry for more than a decade, mainly on the media and automotive side. And a lot of what I did was building tools specifically for researchers. And the longer I was in my job, the more I realized that I should have been developing tools for salespeople instead. Because the really, really good salespeople love data, but the way that data is set up in a lot of companies, even really big ones like, say, Comcast or Cox, a lot of that data ends up going to sort of operations. So where are we going to lay the cable? How are we going to maintain it? Maybe it goes to customer service, but it's really not routed as much to sales and marketing. And what I wanted to do was build tools that would work for our sales and marketing teams or other teams that had that same sort of problem. And you know how a lot of companies are built these days, they have a CIO, where that person is in charge of all the data. So you have to go, not only go up your org structure, you have to go down the CIO's org structure. And our whole point was to take company resources, pool them, and just make them better to access in general. And that sounds really abstract, so I'm gonna talk about some of the stuff we do really specific. This is a very complicated looking slide. This is from our product deck. But what we do is site selection, so you can figure out what competitors are in the area, how well are they doing. We can understand what markets we want to draw. One of the things we do is we help retail and franchise customers understand exactly how many people you need minimum to have a successful location. So for one of our customers, it's the dog stop. They need 40,000 dogs in that area. And if there's less than 40,000 dogs within, like, say, a 20-minute drive time, not a good place to build. And so for a lot of our customers, we help them understand basically how far are people driving to come for your location, and how do we stamp out more locations to create successful territories. We also have a special data reporting tool that will give you the specifics of like you can draw any territory on the Earth's surface. It could be a smiley face, and we'll tell you how many dogs live there, how many people went on a cruise last year, how many people are feeling great about the economy. And so you have all that information to help you understand what you're doing, what kind of products you're gonna build, what's gonna be successful. And finally, we do behavioral predictive analytics. So this is sort of our blockbuster tool right now. We primarily deploy this in utilities right now, but we're also deploying it in retail and franchise. And it's basically, utilities out there, they have regulations that come from whatever state they're in that say you can charge this much money for the utilities you're selling. And you are going to be limited to this footprint, and everything else is subject to approval. And so a lot of your gains might have to come from how you manage programs within your company. So for example, People's Natural Gas, they're the largest natural gas provider in Pennsylvania. They needed to get more people on e-billing. And so one of the things we did was look at all their existing customers, understand who you should even bother with, so we can understand whether or not a household had a computer in it. And if there's not a computer in a household, they're not gonna switch to e-billing. And so we helped them sort of understand who their customers were, figure out the segments that were really prone to switch to e-billing, find areas not hit saturation, figure out, do I say you're gonna help the environment, because we're not gonna cut down trees to send you a bill, and to figure out what messaging we send. And they hit their goal for the year, which we were really proud of being part of that. And so that's part of our predictive analytics. Oh boy. That's great. Thank you for the reassurance. So here's some of our customers. Here's the actual software that we put together. So a lot of our stuff is, it could either be down to the household level, or it can be aggregated up higher. I'm from a bank. I also worked in the banking industry. I was a product manager for one of the oldest software companies in Pittsburgh. I had products in 40 countries. And so I think a lot about privacy regulations and how to make data more anonymous. So we have certain tools that will strip away the extremely private information, especially personally identifiable information, any medical information, so you can still get information about a location without necessarily knowing things on a personal level or just not being creepy. That's our main goal. So, we build all these tools. We've got a bunch of stuff. We have a whole platform with lots of different things on it. And that stuff did not happen overnight. It actually evolved quite a bit from where we started out when we won the McGinnis Venture Competition. We thought we knew what we were doing. And so we had to go through a whole lot of people. So I know Dave was up here earlier saying that one of the most important things you can have is a network. And just having not necessarily even people who will buy your stuff or be your investors, just having people who will talk to you is incredibly valuable really early on in a startup. So the summary is basically that we asked. This is like a life tip, actually, is sometimes if you just go and ask for things, people will tell you the thing you need to know to get it. And this worked for our product. This worked for any pitch competition we did. We were basically like anybody who seemed like they would, even if they were judges or people who were running the competition, we were like, okay, so the people who won the last time in the competition, what did they do? Why did they win? And usually people will tell you, and then you can incorporate that into your presentation. If every scholarship I ever won, I did that for, and I had 2 free master's degrees. So this is my life tip for everybody in general, is if you want something, ask. And so if you're gonna do the McGinnis Venture Competition, find people who won previously, or find people who are gonna be judges in the competition. Ask them what they're looking for. And sometimes they'll be like, no, I can't tell you that. But most of the time they'll be like, let me sit you down and tell you everything. And when you have that, this information is really power. So here's just a brief overview of our history. So in 2016, we won the McGinnis Venture Competition. And I will tell you, we won that competition, and I was like, nothing's going to happen with this company. Like, we're gonna fizzle out. Nothing's going to happen. I'm going to go work for the man and have health insurance. But we actually sat down and talked to, rather than that, I had my co-founder with me, which meant that I had a teammate and I wasn't alone. And I think if I was by myself, I would have been like, I'm too tired to do this. But I luckily had a very energetic co-founder who was 10 years younger than me, who was amazing. And this building did not exist at the time. We worked out of Melon Head whenever we could, because we'd graduated. And we interviewed over 100 people, either over the phone or in person. And that took us about 8 months. And it might seem like something that was like unnecessary, because we just won the McGinnis Venture Competition. We got something great, done. Just build that and then start selling it. And we were basically like, one of the pieces of feedback we got from McGinnis was basically, the thing you built is a solution in search of a problem. And that was a really critical piece of feedback, because it meant that maybe we hadn't built the right thing. And we built this kind of interesting analytics platform, but it wasn't really connected to the real world the way it should have been, maybe. And so what we did was we sat down and talked to as many people as we could. I'm going to talk about the results from that in a minute. So when we thought we had enough information that we indeed had a viable business and we knew what exactly to build next, my co-founder quit his job. We built the MVP within a month and started Alpha Lab. So we were both developers. That just makes everything easier, let me tell you, having 2 technical co-founders, because you don't have to go and find a nerd who's really invested in whatever idea you had. So between the 2 of us, we sat down, we built it in a month. We started Alpha Lab. We got our first sale in February, and there's an article, it's in our Twitter feed, that's out today that's about how startups don't focus enough on sales. And one of the pieces of advice I got about when starting Alpha Lab was you always focus on sales in Alpha Lab. You should make sure that you have your product as far developed as possible so that you can get it out into the world. And that way you could focus on making connections and basically getting into people's hands and critically getting money. Because in this town, it's really hard to get investment unless you have revenue. And so we focused on that. Oh, great. So from there, we won Upprize, which gave us a little bit of liquidity. I think we won $160,000. So that gave us a lot of liquidity to just sort of not have to get day jobs and do as much as we could. We built our first proof of concept for a major enterprise customer in December. I quit my job right after that because I was like, okay, we actually have a source of money, and I have a child, and so she's not going to starve. That's the important thing. We started another accelerator called Quake, but they gave us a bunch of money, so that was totally worth it. They're based in New York, and from there until the present, we've just been growing, acquiring more customers, building out our platform, building more technology, building more sophisticated technology, and it's all built on our customer feedback. And what I want to say is that I am not Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs, there's all these stories about him, coming up with the iPhone, out of nowhere, it just came from God. And that has never worked for me in my entire life. I am not that kind of person. All of my insights for what I need to build or what's the right thing to build always come from customers. And I personally have spent my whole career in the B2B business. And if you're going to do anything in B2B, you have to speak the language of your customers, and you have to understand their problems inside and out. And it might be that I've never worked in utilities before in my entire life. But you know what? I spend a lot of time with people who do, and I bring on advisors who have worked in utilities their entire life, so that I can make sure when I talk to them, I use all the correct acronyms. In franchising, you can't say location, you have to say unit. And it's all really subtle things, but it's how they know that you're not an idiot. Because Dave always says, you're nobody that nobody sent. But if you speak the in-group language, people are more likely to listen to you, and they're more likely to be like, okay, tell me more, which is the important thing for getting information and eventually sales. And the other thing I'd like to say is that I'm sure some of you, maybe not all of you, have industry experience somewhere. That is the most valuable thing you can have when you are starting a company. And because for me, I worked in media, I worked in advertising, but my customers are not in media and advertising, so it means that I have insights from another industry that I can listen to their problems, and I'm like, aha, I solved something really similar for Comcast, but I think it'll work for this natural gas utility. We're going to do this. And having this banking background means I worked a lot in security, and people just feel better when you're like, okay, no, I've seen this before. And or people, they're like, our data's pretty bad, and I'm like, I've seen worse, and believe me, I have always seen worse. I've worked with data off of IBM mainframe from the 70s in Mexico. I have always seen worse data. And so being able to say that, have the experience, and just being able to make the connections. I feel like a lot of inventions come from taking, okay, here's this thing, I'm going to take another thing and add to it, and now I have a new thing. And having that industry experience really helps you do that. So there are two kinds of user interviews that we do that I'm going to talk about. So we do initial market fit interviews. So they're kind of more open-ended. We're just trying to figure out if this even makes sense for them to be one of our customers. Can they even pay me? If they don't have enough money or their sales cycle is really long, maybe it makes no sense for me to be in that industry or solve that particular problem. And then we do product interviews. So once we have something built, we'll sit down with somebody and help them use it, and they'll give us feedback, and we'll basically take that feedback and plug it into our roadmap and build more stuff. So the initial market fit interviews, and this is how pretty much all customer interviews should go, is you should ask open-ended questions, never ask yes or no. If you're like, oh, do you want this new feature? The answer will always be yes. What you should say is in your wildest dreams, what would you want to solve this problem? What's the thing that keeps you up at night? What's the thing that wastes your time the most? And so you want to ask things, and you want to let them talk as much as possible, because you'd be really surprised what threads you get to. And one of the things with market fit interviews that we do that may or may not be available to you guys, but I try and do them with two people. One person asks all the questions, the other person takes notes. You can also record these interviews. You can do whatever works for you. My co-founder loves recording them, but that means you have to go back and listen to them, and sometimes you don't have time for it. So for me, I generally like to have a second person there who's just typing notes. And it's so that typing really detailed notes and asking questions and listening it's impossible to do that at the same time, which is why I have two people. So what you're trying to do is understand, am I solving the right problem? Or and potentially, you can prepare to be wrong, because that will happen a lot. You'll assume oh, this is their biggest problem. I totally know what it is. Or you heard something from somebody else, and you're like, this guy's going to be exactly the same. And you'll be wrong half the time. But this just means you should be listening for opportunities. So somebody might say something, and it's out of left field, but you're like, aha, I know how to solve that problem. So with People's Natural Gas, they're like, we have no idea who's not our customer and is near a pipeline. And I'm like, I know those things. I can tell you exactly where they are, who they are, how to talk to them. Let's talk more. And so we got our first really big enterprise engagement just from them saying that one thing and us being like, aha, we know how to do it, and building a proposal off of that. So have you guys ever conducted these kinds of interviews before? Yeah. So For us, it just means that we take out futures in Post-it notes. So after these interviews, we basically take all the highlights, we write them out on Post-it notes, and then we'll try and find the common threads between all the interviews we did. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like. But it's generating and synthesizing. And you'd be surprised how clear it is what you need to do once you're done with that process. And I'll talk in a little bit more detail in how it works. But our goal for this stuff when we were doing these like market fit interviews is like, are we a viable business at all? And when we look at going into a new vertical or even looking at, so we do a lot of work with like private utilities. Do we want to do public utilities? So what we do is conduct a bunch of interviews, see if it makes any kind of sense. If they're like, we don't have budget, we don't have budget for that, which is what people in the water industry say. But people in the electric and gas industry, they might have completely different answers. And so just doing wide-ranging interviews will tell you exactly what you need to build for who. So this is like also a really hard lesson that we got out of doing those first 100 user interviews, is that people are super nice. And that is like the worst thing to have happen to you when you are just starting out, because nice people will trick you into doing the wrong thing. And so there are lots of people who are like, oh, good job, guys, gold star. And like, we're not in kindergarten. I'm not trying to get praise. I need someone to pay me. And so, if people are like, that sounds like amazing technology, good job, guys, you're amazing. Those people are being very nice, but you need to set all of that aside and basically ask them, will you pay me for this? Will you buy it? If you won't, what do I need to build to make that happen? And if it's something that's like a low-hanging fruit or something you're going to build anyway, fantastic. If it's something where they're like, well, I want the font to be really small so you can barely read it, then that person's never going to be a customer. It doesn't make sense for them to be a customer. And when you move on, you know that you're not going to circle back to them. But if they're like, oh man, I love this. How much does it cost? When can I buy it? Can I work you into my fall budget? Can you send me a proposal? That's all what you want to hear. And when we were doing those 100 user interviews, this didn't tell us that we had a viable business. This did. And so getting to that point, and also like having the chutzpah to be like, would you buy this? For me, it took a lot. My co-founder is like, he will do whatever needs to get done when it comes to these kind of interviews. He'll be like, how much will you spend on it? If I gave you this, would you give me like more money? Like, he's fantastic at that kind of stuff. And for me, it's basically like, I have to like do a breathing exercise before I ask people that kind of stuff, because I feel like money is really awkward. And it's one of the hardest things for me to get over. Now that I've done it a bunch of times, it's much, much easier, but it's the key question that you have to ask when you talk to anybody. So here's what our refinement process looks like. So we ran one of the initial verticals that we served was nonprofits. We still serve them, but we actually converted them to being free. So we have tons of nonprofits, more than 50 in the Pittsburgh area and nationwide, who use our system to basically write grants and understand what's going on with their constituents and basically lobby their constituents. So we have one nonprofit that builds rehab and recovery centers for opioid users, and they were trying to build one in Brighton Heights, and the neighborhood was absolutely against it. But one of the things we have in our system is opioid usage data. And so they were able to basically build a map that showed not only what was going on in the area, but how it had just gotten so much worse over time. So the fatalities were doubling every year from 2015 through 2017. And so they're able to show their neighborhood that and be like, look, guys, this is actually really serious. And everyone got kind of quiet after that. And so data is really powerful for that kind of thing. So these are screenshots from that actual process. And so what would happen is we'd interview people, have them write down the things that they wanted, and we'd have them group them. So like, the generation is just writing down whatever you can think of on a Post-it note. When we do interviews, we write down every single detail that we can get. We put them on Post-it notes, and then we all look at them, and you'll start to see themes emerging. So, you don't want to encourage people to not write the same things over and over again, because that's really powerful when you see okay, this person, and this person have the exact same problem. That's a product, I can sell that. And this is something that's going to make my company a viable company. So you can start to build this stuff together, circle it, and then you get these themes that come out so that you know exactly what to do, what's important, what to focus on. And not only that, but it'll help you communicate the value prop. So when you say what's important to your customers, you not only have their words that they used, but you know what's the most important thing and what to talk about first. Because you're going to talk to different customers in different ways. So From there, we built the product, and what we do our whole lives is we iterate on the product constantly. And so we talk to our customers about it. We have a fairly high-touch sales system right now, which means that I have like one person on my staff, my director of operations. Her whole job is to make sure all of our customers are happy. But while she's making sure that they're happy, she's actually gathering information. So did they have problems with this onboarding process? Is there a feature that they're missing that they would need to be successful in this particular task? And my co-founder and I also go back around and talk to all our customers about this. And when we build something new, we put it in front of our customers either via paper prototypes or through the actual prototype systems itself and have them use it and have them talk out loud while they use it. And that's how we get a lot of feedback on whether or not that thing that we built is going to piss them off or not. And that's my whole goal in life, is not to piss people off with my products. I want them to be happy. I want them to be like, oh, I can't wait to use this thing again. A lot of my customers, they solve real problems. They save their companies millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars by being able to just see the things they need to be able to do. And I want to keep that up forever, and I want to do it across 20 industries instead of just 2. And so understanding this stuff helps us do that. And you'll see that these are the exact same bullet points that I had for our customer interviews. It's the same sort of process. You just have different resources tied into it. But the goal is a little different. So it's, are we building the right features to serve this market? Is there a competitor coming out of nowhere who's doing the same thing for cheaper or better? And this is how we find out this stuff before it's too late. And one of the things that we build out of this product process is personas. So what we'll do is we'll take our customers, basically try and understand what's going on with all of them, and basically build little stick figures of people who match that profile. And then when we build things, we can basically say, is this person going to use it? What are the features that are going to be the most important to them? So when we put the roadmap together, we can basically say, these 3 kinds of customers are served by this feature, but this feature only serves one kind of customer. And it helps us prioritize things and understand exactly what we need to do. And so this is from an exercise we did about 6 months ago, where we sat down, looked at all of our current customers, looked at single thing they'd asked for, wrote it all out on a bunch of Post-it notes. This looks very similar to the thing we showed earlier. So this is another example of generating and synthesizing. So we took everything together, and we were like, OK, what features can we build that will solve this stuff? And this looks really complicated, but it actually ended up, compared to where we were before that, ended up being really simple. And I think one of the things we came out of this is that we had a couple of different products doing different things. And then when we were done, we were like, aha, it's not 3 different products. It is one product that you turn different parts on and off. And that was a huge revelation for us. It really simplified our code base. It made us build just sort of tools that were more exponential. So just the idea that you can turn different features on and off. You don't end up with one new product. You end up with 10 new products because of the way you combine it with the things that exist already. And when you can do that, you can super specialize for all of your customers. They can get exactly the thing that they want. Everybody's a lot happier, and you spend a lot less time maintaining things and marketing things. So that was the really great thing that we got out of that discussion. So I'm just going to go through notes on user experience really quickly. I think user experience is really, really important. I always say that when you have a startup, never skimp on spending on lawyers, accountants, and UX professionals, especially if you are a software company. And I know that you guys aren't going to be able to afford UX help up front, so I'm going to talk about how to fake it yourself real quick. And so you should get UX help wherever you can get it. So if you can get friends and family to use your software or your product, this is my child. She was, I think, 4 at the time when we did this, maybe 5. And so we had her use the software initially, and it was immediately obvious what was really clunky and what we had to replace right away. Because if she couldn't do it, and she can use an iPad like a master, and she's still on staff for QA, believe it or not. And so whatever help you can get, the more ignorant somebody is about what you're trying to do, the better kind of tester that they are. So you don't want your dev team testing their own products that they're building. You want either the people on the marketing team doing it, or honestly, you want your mom doing it. And if your mom's like, oh, this is really easy to use, you are great. And if she's like, I don't understand how this goes together, then you have some work to do. And so that's my first piece of advice. My next is we spend a lot of time with paper and pencil in my company, which might seem weird for a tech or a software company, but for us, it makes a lot of sense and saves us a lot of money because we can do initial designs and sketches. And everybody in my company, not everybody knows how to use, say, InDesign or any of there's a bunch of like really cool, they're not quite paper prototyping, but like prototyping type software. I think Balsamic's one of the really popular ones. So not everyone knows how to do that. If you can use Balsamic and you feel really comfortable with it, that's great. We really like drawing on pen and paper. And here's the reason why we like doing that. So we have a big distinction between low-res and high-res wireframes. So we're building wireframes here, essentially. When you show this to a customer, and it's basically something that you drew on a whiteboard or something that you drew in a notebook, and you ask for their feedback, they're going to be a lot more honest with you than something that's really polished. Because the polished thing, even if it's through Balsamic and you put it together in an afternoon, it's going to look really done to them. And they might not quite give you the feedback that you need because people are nice, which is not great when you're trying to be a business person, and they're going to try and protect your feelings. So they don't want you to feel like you messed up and you need to start all over again. But really, you need someone to tell you that right in the beginning so that you don't make six-figure mistakes chasing the wrong thing. And so that's why I really like paper for this kind of thing. And so for me, we were designing a new tool. I spent a lot of time just sort of sketching out what I thought it would look like. And the next thing I did was I built what's called a paper prototype. And we use different little art supplies for this. I have one thing that I really like that you guys maybe shouldn't spend the money on, but I have transparent sticky notes. And so what I can do is as people navigate the menus and change the map, I can take one sticky note away and put another sticky note on there. I make everything really modular, so when you open a menu, I could take away the little piece of paper and put a new piece of paper there. And the whole idea is that I've got, I'm designing this piece of software. I'm trying to see if it's intuitive, if people can use it. I drew this, and at my own birthday party, I was making my friends go through this piece of software, and they had no idea, how to. This was built for the utility industry. None of them work in the utility industry, but they were able to navigate the menus and understand what was what and what the results were. And so I knew we were on the right track for building this. Everything was in the right place. I knew that some of my icons were they needed a lot of work because people didn't understand what they were intuitively. So that was great. So I knew exactly what I needed to hire a designer for and what we could just build. And so you can do this with literally a piece of paper out of the printer and a pair of scissors and a pen. And I think it's there's a lot of tutorials online about how to do this in detail. I learned this from Suzanne Caffanteris. I think she's at UPMC right now, but she's a genius UX designer. She taught me on the job how to do this kind of thing, and she's also the one who taught me the philosophy of low res versus high res, because high res really confuses the heck out of end users somewhat. And the one thing I want to say about how we use this is we pretend like it's actual software. So I'm like, okay, now click on this, and then people will go boop, and then I open a menu or I pull up a new menu, and then I'm like, okay, now you're done with that thing. What do you do next? And they're like, hit the X in the corner and go boop, and then I take away that piece of paper. And so that's just what you do. It's kind of ridiculous, and it's playing with paper dolls to some degree. But I swear it will save you thousands of dollars in development costs because you'll understand what's clear, what isn't, what you can build right away. You can understand if people are hitting their goals for what this piece of software is for. You can understand if things are going to make people mad. So that's really important. And so I'm a big, big advocate for paper prototyping. Anyway, that is my presentation. And I think we've got, 20 minutes if you guys want to ask questions. Thanks.
But not necessarily on the customer discovery part of things.
Okay.
It's more on the data side.
Yes.
And it seems like you guys are a market research agency, and you provide analytics on people. And my question's two-part. One is, how do you gauge the significance of your results? And then following on that, it sounds like one of your core products was predicting kind of behaviors. If your results are kind of predictions in themselves, how do you gauge the accuracy of those predictions if your source data isn't necessarily 100% accurate?
Sure. So one of the ways we actually have a couple of different ways to talk about. So we have different ways of doing modeling. So for our geographic modeling, we have something that we actually filed a provisional patent on, and it's like a little stoplight. And it says, like, is this sample a good sample that you're taking? So for example, you can think about just circling like any single block in Oakland. And a lot of our stuff gets modeled sometimes from the household level, and in which case we're like green light if we're down to like just the household level. But if we're at, say, the census block group level, which is something that they're usually about the quarter of the size of a zip code, then that little block might not be big enough to have a significant sample of what's going on. And so we will communicate that with a stoplight, and we will basically say, draw a larger territory. And depending on the data, it'll come out a little differently. And so you'll understand a little bit more of what's going on just based on the data set itself. And what was your other question?
And then if you're making inferences about people's behavior in the future based on those, like say you have a significant data set, but it's still probably, my understanding is it's probably an inferred one. I don't know, like, because those are still samples that are not necessarily the entire truth. How do you make a prediction based on a sample that isn't necessarily the truth?
So for us, the best behavior, predictive behavior of future behavior is past behavior. So we will look at, for example, if we're trying to figure out who's going to buy a product in a new area. So say I'm moving to Boston, but I've been in Chicago. So I'll look at all of my locations in Chicago, look at the particular product. If I have the information on individual customer versus who is, and we can look at your customers who did and did not buy that product. And so we do that. It's called a correspondence analysis. And so we'll figure out what's going on with them. For a lot of our customers, they have thousands and thousands of people who buy from them, which is a great sample for a lot of this stuff. And so what we can do is say, like, okay, here are the kinds of people who are buying your stuff in this area. We're going to look in this new area and say, how many people are like that? Where are they located? Are they going to be within a close enough drive time of your location? And do they have the profile that's going to match that so that they're going to buy what you want? And that can be a little tricky because sometimes individual locations will have different customer profiles. So there's one customer that we've been working with where in one location it's all young women who just got their first job and are treating themselves. And then we've got another location in the same city where it's older women who've been in the industry for a while, kids are out of the house, and they just have the cash to burn on this kind of stuff for pampering themselves. And so understanding what segment goes with what location is really important. It gets a little bit harder and a little bit trickier, a little less certain when you do that, but we can take the same thing and stamp it out on the face of the new location. Yes?
When you were doing the initial market interviews, what were some of the major challenges that you guys ran into?
I mean, for us, it's just like getting people who will talk to you for an hour. Like that's really rough. And honestly, getting people who, to be honest, is really hard. Because if you're going to be wrong, I want someone to tell me that I'm wrong. And we are all socialized to be, like not hurt anybody's feelings, even if it means lying to them. So if it's like, oh, do you like my dress? People will be like, I love your dress, you look great. Even though they might be like, oh my gosh, that dress is terrible. And what was she thinking? They won't say that to your face. And building, like you've got maybe an hour to talk to somebody, building a level of trust where people feel comfortable giving you honest feedback is always really hard. And it was something that, I think took a while for us to sort of perfect. Please be honest with us. Like, this is what we need. Like, don't worry about our feelings. We've heard things 100 times. And if it's a new thing, that's always a great, piece of information. And just building up that kind of trust is always, always challenging. Yeah.
Just kind of curious around the same area. So, like, even though you're going through all these customer interviews, you're getting people that are super nice and can be discouraging. Like, what's kind of the mindset that you found helpful or the way to think about customer discovery or market interviews that made it so that it was exciting for you to go and do it? Or how are you thinking about it?
I mean, part of it's just like, my business is one of my favorite things in the world. And it's like, one of the things we talk about is like we're protecting the baby. So I kind of think of my business as my second child. And when you do that, like you will do whatever it takes to protect the baby. And that means I hate talking to people. Like I'm doing this right now, and I'm gonna have another thing where I'm doing public speaking later on today, I'm gonna go lay down after that's over, because this kind of stuff is like, it's not easy. It's not, and it's especially not easy talking. I hate talking on the phone or talking one-on-one to strangers. Like, that's also really, really, really challenging for me. But if it's to protect the baby, I will put up with whatever I have to. I went and talked to 100 of those people. I will talk to 100 people again to do this if I have to, because it's all making sure that the business is safe and viable. And that was where I found the strength to do that, even though it is not my favorite activity. Yeah.
When you're identifying customers to participate in some of these preliminary customer discovery activities, how do you select which customers to reach out to, and what techniques did you use to get an hour of their time to help you?
So this is like gonna be the nerdiest thing ever. So what we did was we did a 20 vertical study. We sat down and brainstormed, okay, for this tool we have, who could even remotely want to use it? And sat down and thought of any industry that would make sense. We're lucky that we're in data, and pretty much everybody needs data. So you get a really wide swath of people. And we made sure to talk to at least 2 or 3 people in every single vertical. For some verticals, we talked to maybe 10 people sometimes. We'd get as many people as we could. I used shamelessly my Tipper network as much as possible to get people to basically answer my, I'm also a Tipper grad. Or one of the questions I'd ask in my user interviews was also oh, if you think of somebody else who would also talk to me, could you please make an introduction? And so sometimes getting introductions from somebody else was also how we did it. But it was you just had to be really shameless and say oh, could I have just an hour of your time? We'll go wherever you need. We'll call you. We'll hit your schedule, whatever you need, and we'll make sure that we do that. And we scheduled just as many as we could. And I think it probably took as much time doing the interviews as it did finding people and scheduling them. But it was critical to get sort of a wide sampling of different customers. Because if you just talk to people who are all in the same sort of network doing the same sort of things, they're going to say the same stuff. And it might mislead you to thinking that, aha, I have something, when really you're actually just hitting a really specific niche. Oh, yay, fun. Any other questions, guys? Yes?
So, do you have any pivots so far in terms of what your product has been? And that was my first question. Second one is, like you said, you hit these early niches. How do you know that you're going to build, you're going to continue growing into different verticals versus building all possible products or use cases for a certain vertical? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so that's really hard. So we're a small team, and for us right now and our size, I think 2 verticals are our max. Because like I said, you have to understand how to speak their language, and you have to spend real time with either of those verticals. We have to go to trade shows for those verticals. That means I have to create connections. As we hire in more staff, we'll probably hire them to specialize in specific verticals that we're going to move into. So you had a couple other questions in there? Pivots. So here's the fun of being a software company is I never have to say pivot. I can just say we expanded our platform. And so we started with one tool. It's still in there, and people still use it all the time. And then we built more tools on top of it and more tools on top of it. And it's less pivoting and more expanding our capabilities. And so our value prop changed. So we used to be exclusively about geographic locations. And now we talk about people and places a lot, because now we do customer analytics, and we do a lot about behavior and understanding who your customers are and finding more like them. And so what I like to think is that we just expanded our reach rather than pivoting, because we didn't quite leave those things behind. They came with us. But at the same time, we're like, okay, this is where the real money is. We're going to add that and pursue it as well. Yes?
How do you make connections between clients that you're working with who may be transacting with them, and then you mentioned that you knew kind of where they lived or about where they lived. How do you make connections between the transactional data and the locational data?
Address. That's it. All we have to know is address.
Provided by, so it's only if that client has a membership with that location.
Or they might have a loyalty rewards program, or they might have other ways of collecting it. When you pay a lot, every time I'm at IKEA, they're like, "What's your zip code?" You can collect that. So even at the zip code level, you can tell a lot of what's going on. Zip codes are destiny in quite a lot of situations. We can do many things with addresses, but we can also really work with zip codes as well. Yes.
How much of the data that you use comes from the client, and
So our data tends to come from 3 different sources. So we've got lots of public data. So anything that came from the US Census, the American Community Survey, we have data from the FDIC. We've got data on all the hospitals out there, all the schools, all the universities. So if it's out there and it's public, we'll put it in the system for free, especially if our customers find it and they're like, oh, I really like this, can you add it? No problem, it's in the system. If it's, for a lot of our customers, they have their own internal data that will go in there. Some of our customers are really sophisticated about keeping their internal data and have lots of it, and it's in good shape, and it's really easy to put in. Other customers have almost nothing, in which case we'll give them like a little bit of consulting time to help them understand how to collect it. Otherwise, what we'll do is work at a sort of a higher level, and we'll either do surveys or we'll just we'll kind of make assumptions. We'll say like, okay, 30-minute drive time, or you know that people aren't going to cross the river to come here, so we're going to look at just the downtown area. So you can even just circle certain features where you're pretty sure people are coming from. So it really depends on the sophistication level of our customers.
You normally have to watch your customers' data before you close the...
Yes, yeah. So we have what's known as a data concierge service. So that's our third type of data, actually. So we help people find private data that will help accomplish the same sorts of things. So expenditure data on, how much people are spending on gum or eyeglasses or motorcycles. We've got data like that we can hook you up with. We can figure out where your competitors are. We can get household level data for you. So we buy a lot of data, so we have sort of bulk prices with our data partners, and so we'll do that. For our customers, as a part of onboarding, if they want to put their data in the system, we ask for a sample, and then we'll basically assess whether or not we need to charge extra money to put it in there, because we also have like a data cleansing system. Yes?
When you were working on McGinnis and everything like that, and while a Tepper student, were you also working on your star stories and behaviorals? Or did those kind of go hand in hand, so you could kind of focus more on your pitching and less on the other stuff?
I mean, one of the things was I was an older Tepper student when I was here, so I had 10 years of career behind me when I showed up at the door. And so star stories, I feel like you have to work on them. I was just I've done a ton of things. Here's a star story, fine. And I almost I was really terrible to the Career Center. I didn't do any of the Career Center stuff that they asked me to do, and I still got a consulting offer. So I'm just saying, if you've got additional skills, you do you. So I'm not a great example of the kind of person who took advantage of that. I did use a lot of the Excel Leadership Center. That was I put some time into that, and that actually paid off really well. That worked for me. I can't say for anybody else. And it really depends on what industry you're going in. If you're starting a startup or wanted to join a startup, the Tepper Career Center is not for you. I'm just going to be blunt about that. But if you want to go into consulting and you want to make some good money in investment banking, they are your best friends. Any other questions? That was pretty blunt, but.
Appreciate it.
Yep. All right. Thanks, guys.